Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with fellow of the Chartered Professional Accountants, Michelle Causton. She has an MBA, she's a seasoned public speaker, and an educator with a rich background in accounting and professional development. Having served as the president of the CGA Ontario, she has played a key role in shaping the organization's strategic direction. Transitioning from public accounting to academia, Michelle has influenced countless students as a university and college professor, earning awards for excellence in teaching and mentorship. Her passion lies in promoting ethical leadership and effective communication, which she shares through speeches, writings, and online content. It's quite a story. Enjoy.
It's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute after the show today.
No, I'm really glad to. I've been paying a little attention to your podcast, and you certainly interview a lot of different people, a variety of topics. So it's really interesting to me. So I really thank you for this opportunity.
Well, I started out in jazz radio, and I've kind of branched out, and so I love delving into everyone that's out there in the world that's doing wonderful things, and you're doing that. So thank you for taking a minute out. And I'd love to begin our conversation with, one of the more momentous things that's happened in our lifetime is surviving a pandemic. And I'm curious, in your line of work, how did you survive that time period, and how did it change the way that you do things now?
That is really a terrific question, because I think about it all the time, actually. I was nearing the end of my teaching career. I loved teaching and didn't want to retire. So I was kind of fighting it off. I spent some time thinking about whether I wanted to retire. I decided no. I had retired from the college, which was full-time, and I'd morphed into teaching at the university part-time. So that was a good transition. And then the pandemic hit. And just almost overnight, things got shut down. When I look back, it's really amazing to me how we went from a vague premonition, fear, science fiction type anxiety to it's real. And now they've shut down the universities. The good thing for me is I was used to doing virtual. I was used to having meetings on Zoom and that sort of thing. The university did have a platform that was similar. We got the students all hooked up, and we got back to class right away. And we started doing classes, and it was fine until I stopped one day and had a little conversation with them. They were terrified. If I was afraid, and I was, they were absolutely, but they weren't showing it. They were away from home. They couldn't talk to their friends anymore. They couldn't do all the social activities. And now that one little anchor, the university, was away. It was distant. And a lot of their profs were just posting written material because some unfortunately didn't know how to really engage over the internet. So it was pivotal for me in how well you could connect with people through the internet as opposed to face-to-face. Because up to that point, I'd been doing a lot more face-to-face interaction with people. The next step was I thought, well, this is, good news, bad news as we continue to be shut down. I'm well prepared to take all my courses online. And, if there's anyone that can't do it, I can pick up some slack for the university. But the strange protocols at the university said, no, we've got some online teachers, so they have the right of first refusal. And there I was suddenly in the midst of a pandemic without anything meaningful to do in my life. And I was a new level of terrified. So things were slowly being pulled away. But what it did for me is I transitioned. I started creating online courses. I started looking for ways to have Zoom meetings and do courses and lectures and whatever else anyone wanted to talk to me about over the internet. So it was huge in that transition.
I'm curious, if I put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day, and one of the kids was curious and wanted to know what you did for a living, and they were like, hey, what do you do for a living? How would you answer that child?
The short answer for a child would be, I talk. And they usually just kind of look at you. And I said, no, this is what I do for a living. I talk to people who hopefully want to listen to me, and I provide instructions, sort of like a teacher, but entirely different. And I create visual images to put behind me so that can engage the audience. Usually at that point, they've started to lose interest when I'm talking to young kids. I'm thinking about my grandchildren who go like, oh, okay, Grandma, yeah, all right. But yeah, that's the short answer.
Talk to me a little bit about what you wanted to be in the third grade. What was your dream? What did you want to grow up and become?
Well, when I was in public school, I had a couple of different career aspirations, although we didn't talk about such things back then. But I loved to pretend I was a bank teller. I loved to pretend I was a teacher. And so those types of things, were interesting. And then there was this whole thing about being kind of good at numbers. So somewhere, not probably in grade 3, but as I went through public school and into high school, I started to have an interest in how you could use numbers in a career. I actually just put one foot in front of the other, and I never had a plan.
So take me back to your childhood and where you were born and raised, and how this fascination with numbers and how your life turned out the way it did. How did all of these things, these seeds, get kind of planted into you?
Yeah, I grew up in Toronto and grew up during a time when Toronto was an absolutely wonderful city to grow up in. The world has changed. I'm not 100% sure that anywhere in the world has that kind of an ideal situation. We had lots of freedom. We could do what we wanted to do. Nobody was worried. And so that was a wonderful time in my life. The progress that led me from school, getting bored with school fairly early on. In those days, grade 13 was the end of high school. I left at the end of grade 12. I started a family fairly young because that was sort of the next thing that you kind of did. Again, without a plan, without a real thought to it. But I was soon, forgive me, children, my darling children, I soon got kind of bored with this whole motherhood, housewife routine, and started to look for something to do. So I went back to school. I did it through correspondence courses, did well at that. That love of numbers, I think that you build on what you're good at. And I had some skill in that area. So I got good marks in math and English. So that I was going to follow those two paths into something, although, again, it wasn't a plan. I started taking courses in accounting. I then joined the Professional Accounting Association, took courses through them, and after 5 or 6 years found myself with an accounting designation and working in accounting. And I loved it. I loved the talking to people part of accounting.
So I'm curious, as somebody that loved English, what was your favorite book? What was the one that really stood out when you were growing up?
Oh, probably a couple. I mean, depending on what age I was, of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, To Kill a Mockingbird. There was a series of books called Swallows and Amazons that was about boys and girls, and big adventures. And the girls got to have big adventures, too, so that was kind of fun. So sort of a fantasy kind of thing really appealed to me. But, then you also read some of the classics through school, and some of those really informed me as well. I loved anything that underneath it all, there was a moral to the story. Not heavy-handed, but a moral to the story, something that helped me to understand better about how integrity is so important in everything we do, where our heroes might be flawed, but they're still doing the right thing when they can.
Hero for you, an inspiration for you in your life?
Well, I've got a couple. One of them is someone you'll not have heard of. He was the CEO of CGA, the Canadian, dear me, stuttering here. Who were we? We were the Certified General Accountants of Ontario. Sorry, that organization morphed into another one, so I've almost forgotten their name. But he was the CEO for many years, and he led with integrity. He was probably the most shining example I have ever met in real life. Everything he did with kindness, integrity, always looking for the good of the organization and its members, and he was so humble, I'll say. That's kind of a funny little word, isn't it? But he was humble. He didn't take credit for things, even though much of what happened in the organization was due to him. He kept his employees in lockstep with where he was going, and he did that through being inspirational and paying attention and inspiring us. So I really took a lot of messages from him.
Right now, current day, if you could meet one person alive on the planet that you find fascinating, interesting, who would that be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Oh, wow. You know, I haven't thought about that one for a little while. A friend of mine one day said, she says, "I'll know I've made it in life when Oprah Winfrey interviews me." And I thought, I'd never thought about it. And I said, no, sorry, Oprah, that's not going to work for me. But Jon Stewart, he's so funny and smart and insightful. Yeah, that would be the pinnacle for me, is to have an interview with Jon Stewart, although I might end up looking really bad.
Oh, no, I would love to join you for that. That would be great. He would be a wonderful one. So I'm curious, in your career and your life, you know, what has been kind of your overall inspiration to get up every day to do the work that you do? What has been kind of the gumption and drive you've had?
When I get up in the morning and I have absolutely nothing to do that day, nothing on the schedule at all, there's the odd time that feels liberating, but most of the time it just feels like a void. I don't like to be bored. So when I wake up in the morning and I know I have something to accomplish that day that is doable, that is going to move my personal agenda forward, those things get me lit up. But when I'm going to talk to someone and have an opportunity to connect with a person and perhaps help them in some way that I don't even know they need help, those are the things that really get me out of bed in the morning.
So when you look back on your career, you know, there's always these growth periods, whether something really good happened or it was just up and you grew a lot. What was that period for you in your career when you really grew and kind of realized what your role was?
Yeah, that volunteer work, that's what did it for me. I was, as I said, I was following along in a career path and doing different things and enjoying my life. And I decided to become involved in my professional association at the local level. That seemed very manageable to me because I didn't have big dreams. And I did that, and it was very, very satisfying, and I worked with some great people. And that gave me the opportunity then to attend the provincial board as a guest to a meeting, and I was inspired by that and thought, oh my, this is a place that I would be comfortable being. I ran for that board. I got on it. It got me involved in the whole issue of governance, which was probably, that really lit things up for me because I started speaking about governance issues on a variety of different levels, but my primary interest was for not-for-profit organizations and how they can do a better job at governing. And I spoke on that topic in seminars and across Canada into the Caribbean. So it was really pivotal because it really taught me a lot about myself and what I loved to do and you know, what I was reasonably good at, because it's nice when those two things match up. They don't always.
So at the end of the day, when you look back on your life and career, what are you the proudest of?
I think for a sense of pride, I have to talk about my students in the college and the university. I'm still in touch with a number of them, and I know they nominated me for the mentorship award, which I did receive. And so I'm very proud, not so much of me, but of them. And I guess to the extent that I was helpful, inspirational, did anything that helped them move along the path that they were probably already going to take, that does give me moments of pride.
So speaking of youth, if you had a dream tonight, ran into the 18-year-old version of you that just graduated from high school, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on what you've seen in your life, the wisdom you've gained over the time, what advice would you give that young version, and would that version of you listen?
The advice I'd give is that you are more than you realize, that you're worth more than you think you are, that you have important things to say, whether anyone listens or not, and to trust yourself more. And would that 18-year-old listen? No, not really. I'd like to think that the 18-year-old me would hear that kind of advice and go, well, that felt nice, thanks very much. Maybe tuck it away at the back of my mind, but I don't think it would have any huge impact at that point.
What's the best advice that you've ever gotten in your life?
Best advice that I've ever gotten in my life? You get so much good advice over the years. You truly, truly do. I can't say anything really stands out, but I do know that one of the lessons that I learned and has resonated throughout my career is the need for personal integrity, and how right now, when I would teach ethics in the classroom, the students were not terribly engaged in that, and it led me to want to figure out why and how we could talk about this very interesting topic without anyone feeling threatened by it or diminished by it or shamed by it. And that's been a quest for me. So I don't know about good advice other than that sense that you need to have integrity in your personal life in order to be successful.
So let me ask you this. If we get off the phone call here, the interview, and a time machine pulled up in front of your house, and you could go anywhere in the history of time and see one event with your own eyes, what would you love to have seen?
I think I would have liked to see Martin Luther King live and in action.
That would be a good one. So let me ask you this. Everyone out there has their version, their idea, their perception of you. But you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
The way other people see us is a really interesting notion when you realize that some people see you entirely different than you see yourself. I think I'm seriously curious. I think I'm genuinely interested in people, but perhaps it doesn't come across because I know some people have found me to be a little distant. I know some people think that that they see my curiosity as challenging. You know, I challenge my own ideas all the time. That's really interesting. Why do I think that way? And when I challenge someone else in that regard, they do hear it as an argument rather than that. So I like to think I'm a good person.
Excellent. So if anyone out there wants to reach out, learn more about you, hire you, any of the good business, where's the best place to go?
Probably the best and easiest place to go is to my website, which is BZMIND. So you could pronounce that busy mind, BZMIND.ca.
Excellent. Final question. What's the best thing about living in Toronto?
Well, I don't live in Toronto anymore, so the best thing about living not in Toronto is that I'm connected to nature a lot more than as a city girl that I ever thought I would care to be. But it is fabulous. But Toronto's a wonderful city, and it's got, all the theaters and the restaurants and the variety. So I think it has the same things as most big cities do. And I think perhaps still a slightly lower crime rate than some, but I'm not an expert on that.
Excellent. Michelle, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your story, your passion, your time. Keep doing the wonderful work out there in the world.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this. It was great fun. I hope it was helpful to someone somewhere.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.